The Leading Like a Lady podcast was created to remind Black women, young and old, that acting like a lady is exactly what the world needs in leadership. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email.
There is no longer any doubt that Joe Biden is unfit to be our commander-in-chief. The Biden White House far-left hate because they know this to be true and have been caught participating in one of the greatest media cover-ups in American history. Only American citizens should vote in American elections to stop Joe Biden's radical efforts to roll back women's rights and change Title IX to allow biological men to access women and girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and sport.
What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were?
When Mr. Trump left, we had an economy that was in free fall. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible.
The only jobs he created from the COVID, he has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
So I'm not going to lie, watching and researching all these videos and articles about the Republicans' 2025 agenda has really been stressing me out. And on top of that, I've been extremely sick. But my duties as a journalist, right, is to process this information, make it make sense, and come up with an angle for how we should view and understand what the hell is going on, because there's a lot going on. And mind you, it's not just the Republicans that are stressing me out. It's definitely also the Democratic Party, the whole election system in general. But now that I have combed through, waded through all of the information, here's some insights that I don't think are talked about too much, and I think it's going to help you weigh the pros and cons of what role you want to play in the next couple of months leading up to November 4th. So first, let's settle in on two questions, and you tell me which one is more relevant to your situation. Are you in the position where you are ready to leave the country? God forbid if the worst case scenario candidate wins the election in November? Or are you on the camp of no matter what happens with the election, I'm going to be here, whether it's by force or by choice. I'm not planning to leave the country. And the reason why I'm asking this is because we've been in a similar situation at least twice. Back in, if you were around a time, early 2000s, 2005, when we had the Bush elections, that's Bush Jr., and also in 2016, when we had, that election. And also, to some extent, 2020, but a little bit less, and I'm going to explain why in a second. So a lot of people are looking at the upcoming 2024 election in America, and they feel like it's a doomsday scenario because it seems like the country's in shambles. They don't think they have a functioning democracy, or they won't have one, at least in the next couple of months, with the president and the Supreme Court taking away all the rights they're supposed to have under the Constitution. And it's kind of similar to the existential threat that basically we felt in 2016, but we were kind of joking with it because we didn't think there was any way that someone like who could become president. But in 2024, we now know it is clearly possible because it happened. And we're clear about what that kind of presidency under that individual would look like. We've also had 4 years with Biden as president, and many Americans are not as convinced that he's mentally or physically well enough to save them from the worst case scenario presidency in some people's mind. So some statistics. Suppose 15% of Americans say that they're thinking about moving out of America. And this is actually kind of true according to a Gallup poll, approximately. In that case, a smaller percentage of that 15% of those people who are saying they're thinking about moving out of America actually left or have taken any kind of steps towards leaving, as in applying for a visa or looking for an international home. And that's been reported by the Washington Post. Ironically, there was a plateau between those years that I was talking about earlier, let's say 2005 and 2020, with the number of Americans moving to Mexico and Canada, which were the two main destinations that people threatened to flee to if Bush won the presidency in 2004, and also if Trump won, which he did in 2016, and if he were to win in 2020, which he did not. So those two countries, using them as proxies, show us that there was fewer people going in and out between 2005 and 2020, even with the, again, existential threat or the worry that these two people will become president. These numbers aren't broken down by race or gender, which is what's making it stressful for me because I'm trying to report on it from statistically how many Black women are either attempting to leave America or thinking about it due to the country's political state. But since this is a concept that Americans have been exploring on Reddit or in Facebook groups, I still wanted to ask this question. Is it in Black women's best interest to create a Get Out of America game plan for 2024? Or is it wiser for them to think about staying and fighting against the issues that would make them want to leave the country permanently? So we're going to talk about those two hypothetical situations now. Let's start with the most realistic scenario because of what the statistics say. You stay at home in America. Now what do you do? Listening to this, you may not be an activist. You may not do anything politically outside of voting every 4 years and watching the news. But at the same time, you may be scared of what you're hearing and what you're seeing from both presidential candidates, Trump and Biden. What I'd say to you is that if you decide to stay in America, whether by choice or by force, and you're scared about what's about to come, you may want to think about how you can do more to protect yourself. It's no more being cute and just sitting by the sidelines and saying something will figure itself out. You have to start asking yourself what you're willing to get involved in to make sure staying in America doesn't become a hazard to your mental wellness, to your physical health, or to your psychological, well-being. A lot of that is easier said than done, and on this platform, we're not pushing any specific kind of political agenda. We're just showing you the options that are out there. When you're hearing conversations about being more progressive or being liberal or being centrist, yada, 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 you have to think for yourself and do some research and say, okay, which of these political avenues is going to make sure that I am best protected, realistically and very specifically. I'm not going to push any one on you, although I do have my own personal view of which one is best. But again, this is time to do your homework. It's time to actually sit down with a pen and a paper and a checklist and say, this is what I need to feel safe here if I were to stay. Which of these political points of views is actually checking all of these boxes? And not just in terms of what they're saying, because everybody's going to say what they need to say to get your vote, but what has been the track record. And this is where a lot of Americans in general, not just Black Americans, but maybe particularly also Black Americans have fumbled the ball a lot of times. And we sometimes also don't know where to go to find that information. Or sometimes we're just dealing with life, which is like my situation right now, where sitting down and researching what people are doing at every given moment, especially when it's not a major ticket or major office that the person is running for on the ballot, that can be a huge load, a whole nother workload on top of everything else that you're trying to do to survive, as a Black woman especially. So I get it. And I just want to make sure that I really emphasize that and say that that is acknowledged. I don't think a lot of people who want the best for Black women, for Black people, acknowledge the fact that people are just way too overwhelmed and hit back to back with work concerns, family concerns, health concerns to really take researching politics and understanding what's going on in terms of especially local politics very seriously. However, given all these buzzwords that the people are throwing out there, Project 2025, MAGA, genocide, xenophobia, the list goes on. This is really a matter of life or death. And I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say that people are literally dying as a result of choices that people who are currently in office are making and are surely going to suffer in the situation where another person ends up taking the office. So I just want to put that out there. And if you are curious to find resources that will start to introduce this information to you in a way that you can understand, and you just want somebody to give it to you straight, I'm going to put some resources in the description box of this video. If you're watching it on social media, look at the caption for where that information is that you can use to start to get yourself educated on this. So again, at minimum, you need to know which of these political parties, which of these political movements is actually going to meet your needs in order to make you feel comfortable staying at home. And then the next step is to find out who is responsible for leading these campaigns in your city, all the way down to your neighborhood, to your block. Scenario number 2. Let's say you leave America. Where are you going and why? This is a very important question to ask, although it's maybe very obvious that it is an important question to ask. Let me not take that for granted. But you can't just think that getting up and leaving America is going to magically change things. You need to always be doing your homework and always have a clear explanation or understanding of why you are making a choice to go to one place over the other. And that can be overwhelming because there's over how many countries in the world. So you really need to really do your due diligence. And I'm going to start with a few countries that are the most popular destinations for Americans usually when they are leaving the country. But this is not exhaustive at all. So Mexico and Canada were the most popular destinations in the past, and we'll start there. Hypothetically, are you better off in one of those two versus the United States? You may be in luck with Mexico. They recently held their presidential elections and now have the country's first female president. She identifies as a leftist, and her goals include increasing the social safety net for people living in Mexico. That includes programs that increase household income, create new jobs, etc. If you want me to do an in-depth video on the migration process for leaving America and moving to Mexico, leave a comment below. Canada isn't hosting any elections until next year, but here are some important statistics. It has one of the highest employment rates in the world, but the average income of residents is not high enough to make me excited that your life would dramatically change or be better based on salary alone. Again, if you want me to go more in depth about living in Canada, you have to leave a comment below. Another top destination for Americans is Europe, and surprise, surprise, they're dealing with almost the same level of political craziness as Americans are based on these election results. Let's start with Italy, which is the most controversial. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni won 28.3% of the vote in the European Union's parliamentary election. So that gave her the majority. She is from a very right-wing conservative party called the Brothers of Italy. Meloni's ruling coalition saw its support in Italy increase to almost half, 50%. And voter turnout was low. So actually that might not have been representative of the majority of how Italians think. But I could just tell you, and if you've been reading the blog, you know from my recent experience, I felt the shift in the mood based on this election. Let's go to Germany. Germany. The far-right Alternative for Germany party has increased its foothold in representation in parliament. There's been a decline in support for the Social Democrats, and there's been so-called mixed results for the Green Party and the Free Democrats that are based in Germany. And as with Italy, people are concerned that this is showing that the far-right movement is also having a significant impact on Germany, that they're getting more representation and going to have more influence on policies in the future. So that might be something to keep in mind. Germany tends to be the European country with the most stable job market, the most stable economy. So that's usually why it's attractive for expats or migrants. France. The leftist party won most of the seats to form their own government. The far-right National Rally, came in basically last place. So even though there was a lot of fear that Le Pen was going to take over and bring far-right politics into France, that did not succeed. So for some people, that might be good news. I say all of this to point out that you may not escape the thing that you're running away from in America just because you go abroad. There are so many other countries that are holding important elections this year specifically in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. So there's no way that you can escape doing your homework, and you need to research which countries are offering the best protections for you, once again based on your checklist of priorities. There are going to be links available in the description box of this video or in the social media captions if that's where you're finding me, if you need to know where to start with your research. But for the sake of keeping this very succinct and very short, I'm going to end that right here. If I were to summarize based off of looking at both scenarios, what is better or what's best, I really think it boils down to what's in your best interest, to be honest with you. Some people might have bigger picture views of why they choose to stay in America and fight. That doesn't necessarily have to do with their individual protection. It has to do with making sure that they can ensure a greater prosperous nation for, the future generations to come that are going to come out of America. I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking about your self-preservation as well. So again, I think to just summarize based off of comparing and contrasting both scenarios, it's ultimately going to boil down to which one is actually realistic for you to accomplish, and then what next steps do you have to put into place to make sure that no matter which choice you choose, you're going to come out on top, being protected and able to live and thrive without feeling under constant threat. And that's the whole purpose of us being here, leading Like a Lady, is to make sure that you feel secure about your status in life. So again, leave a comment in the caption, underneath the captions or underneath this video, telling me what additional information that you're looking for when it comes to deciding which way to go or which decision to make. And please don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want more content like this video, share this video so that more women, especially Black women, can get these resources and start mapping out their 2024/2025 plan as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email.